Slop Stories. Slop Stories.
Slop Stories presents Schoolyard Justice by DePaola. 3 boys rode their bikes through a chilly neighbourhood, joy beaming on their spectacled faces. It was autumn, and the red and orange leaves crunched under their tyres, and they skidded over the old gravelly street. The first boy was Jack. He was thin and pale, and wore a huge headgear to help maintain his braces. He had perfectly straight teeth, but his deranged dentist convinced Jack's parents that he needed braces anyways. It was such a painstaking procedure that it took 6 days straight in the dentist's chair with no food to lock the headgear into place. Everyone called him Cage, which in the end didn't offend him too much, since it sounded pretty alpha. The second boy was extremely tall and rail-thin, with platinum blonde hair down to his shoulders. His nose took up more than 2/3 of his face, and reached out an extreme 4.5 inches. His name was Corbin, but most folks called him Crane. He wasn't sure if it was due to his height or his beak, but either way it hurt him to be called Crane. The third boy was morbidly obese, and at only 5 feet tall, and was a completely round beach ball. Joseph had red curly hair, his glasses dug into his cheek meat, and his eyes were half shut due to the encroaching flesh. The kids at school called him Salami.
Salami.
These 3 boys were best friends, and all a part of the school's computer team. They had earned themselves the moniker of the Windows Gang. They also were not sure if this was because all 3 of them wore glasses or because they used Windows 95 on their school computers. They continued riding through the neighbourhood, each with a steaming pizza strapped to the back of their bikes. The boys were joking with each other and laughing, ready for their weekly game night. Out of nowhere, a thick rope lifted from under the leaves on the street. The boys had no time to react before being clotheslined by the rope, knocking the wind out of them and sending their bikes flying forward. All 3 boys were laying in the road and trying to catch their breath. Before they could move, all 3 of their pizzas fell from the sky, slipping out of the boxes and landing directly on their faces. The boys screamed from the burns, and Salami started eating his way through his pizza while Jack tried getting it untangled from his headgear. Crane's nose had pierced the pie like a sword. They were all crying, and after a minute sat up simultaneously, hearing a loud crunch in the distance. Old man Peterson had backed out of his driveway and directly onto all 3 of their bikes, completely crushing them. He didn't notice and drove away. The boys were pizza-sauced, winded, burnt and scraped, and had just lost their only source of freedom on this earth. They stared blankly at the destroyed bikes until they heard a snickering, evil laughter in the distance. Danny Beretta stood behind a tree, the other end of the rope clutched tightly in his hand. He laughed so smugly, pointing at them with his free hand, while he jumped up and down with delight. "Oh no, have the windows been shattered? Better see if we can boot them up again," Danny said through his laughter. Young boys in ski masks came from nowhere and started kicking the boys on the ground. They tried to shield themselves to no avail and were brutally kicked. "That's enough. These poor nerds are covered in pizza stains. Why don't we give them a washing?" Danny yelled from the sidelines. The boys were pelted by endless water balloons, and on this crisp fall night were instantly shivering. The last water balloon fell onto Crane's nose, held for 2 seconds on the tip, and then popped up his nostrils and into his eyes. "Ha ha! Later, nerds," said Danny. He snapped his fingers, and within moments all of the bullies had gone, leaving the 3 boys in the middle of the street, completely shell-shocked. One by one they slowly helped each other get to their feet and gather their wits. They were devastated. Bikes gone, pizza ruined, and confidence shattered. They picked up their bikes and went their separate ways, as none of them were up for a game night anymore. They were each punished for breaking their bikes by their individual sets of parents. No video games or TV for a week. The three nerds were now bitter and angry and spent the next week at school plotting on how to get justice against Danny. It wasn't all rosy. Crane got pantsed in the locker room. Danny tangled fish line all through Jack's headgear. Salami had his knees glued to the restroom floor in front of the urinal. These bullying attempts only furthered the nerds' resolve. They would have justice, and it came during fourth period PE, 1 week after they had been tossed from their bikes. They were nerds, not bullies, and had done their absolute best to prank Danny. They slipped a glass fart bomb into his tennis shoe, and while he was lacing up for track, it shattered and nicked Danny's foot. "What the?" Danny exclaimed. Then came the stinking gas fart smell. Everyone in PE laughed at the stinky shoe, quickly pointed at Danny, and then lost interest and went about their day. The nerds, however, continued laughing and pointing. Danny looked at them knowingly and formed a wicked grin. "Teacher, those boys, they put glass in my shoe. My foot appears to be cut. Come look. I don't want to hurt it more during my run. I was looking forward to running track too," Danny said, a plainly false sadness to his voice. The PE coach walked over and inspected Danny's foot. Danny slipped him a $100 bill. "Yeah, this looks pretty deep. You should head to the nurse's office and I'll let her know you can go home early," the coach said in a monotone voice. "You three, detention, now." A few weeks had passed and the nerds hadn't only been expelled from their junior high school, but their parents had also been summoned to court. Danny had sued all three families for $5 million in damages. When the boys and their parents arrived at the courthouse, they were greeted by Danny in a full-leg cast with a huge smile on his face. The judge was Danny's great-uncle. After a 2-day trial, the jury found the three boys guilty, and Judge Beretta passed his sentence. "Since the parents of these degenerates do not have the funds Daniel Beretta is entitled to, they will be sentenced to work 10 years in a hard labor camp owned by Daniel's parents. As the parents will be living full-time at the labor camp, these three boys will be emancipated immediately and sent to 3 different boarding schools, one in Malaysia, one in Cambodia, and one in Luxembourg. Court is adjourned." Judge Beretta concluded, hitting his gavel down 3 times. The parents looked at the 3 nerds one last time, their teeth gritted and eyes furious. The bailiff and his guards cuffed them and took them out screaming. The boys would never see their parents again. Cage, Crane, and Salami looked as if they had become men in a matter of moments. Their eyes were withered and grey, and they were shipped off to their individual boarding schools. The 3 friends would also never see each other again. Danny's parents not only owned the hard labour camp, but they were also the foreman. They carried large whips and cracked the nerds' parents on their backs any time that they tried to take a moment's rest. For 18 hours a day, the nerds' parents broke giant rocks with pickaxes, and at night they were made to sleep standing up, held by the same thick ropes that Danny had tripped their children with. Danny and his parents sat around their dinner table, each individually prayed for the food, and they enjoyed dinner over happy conversation. Once the meal was complete, Danny gathered all the dishes and washed up himself. His mother brewed them each a hot cup of apple cider, and they put on one of their favourite movies and enjoyed it together as a family, snug in their mansion, fireplace roaring. Thank you for listening. I've been your severely dehydrated narrator, Simon Hensby. And now for today's memoir of misery.
No.
Two young kids had posted up a lemonade stand on the side of the road and were giggling and screaming any time a car drove by, waving their colourfully decorated signs. After a while, an extremely fancy car stopped by, put $300,000 in cash in their tip jar, and peeled out, getting away as fast as possible. The kids had no idea what to do. Their young minds were rippling. Moments later, a large black SUV pulled up to the lemonade stand. The windows were tinted completely black. The kids stared at the car until one of the windows rolled down, and a man in sunglasses looked back at them with true evil in his eyes. He smiled, and his teeth were completely gold.